Hello, I'm Aoife Devitt and welcome to 50Faces TV. Today we're joined by Jason Mitchell, Head of Sustainability at Man Group in London. He's the podcast host of the Sustainable Future podcast and one-time guest on the 50Faces podcast. We wanted to invite Jason back to speak about recent podcast guests, conversations that have inspired him, and what his outlook is on the current state of sustainability investing, what gives him hope, what gives him cause for despair, and some ideas as to what we'll be speaking about in the years ahead. Welcome, Jason. Great to see you here.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Again, it's great to see you.
So let's talk a little bit about your ongoing Sustainable Future podcast. What are some of the topics that you've covered recently, and any guests in particular that inspired you?
Yeah, it's been fascinating. I guess over the last 6 to 12 months, I've really made an effort to get closer to the science community. Specifically, that means people like Tim Lenton at the University of Exeter, who's one of the top climate scientists studying feedback loops. And most recently, I've reached out to Simon Levin. And so he is at Princeton University. He is, I'd say, a giant in the field of mathematical and theoretical ecology over the last 60 years. And so that was really trying to kind of focus on the science community as a way to kind of animate the show a little bit more. Some other areas that I'm really interested in, universal ownership, which, again, I tend to get a kind of a thick-lidded, bored kind of response when I talk to a lot of people about this. But the reality is it's incredibly relevant for a couple of reasons. One, there's just this super fascinating discussion, even debate, particularly over the last several years within the academic community. And that has major implications for practitioners, for investors. And I think, secondly, it's just a fascinating on-ramp into the fiduciary duty discussion, which, as I'm sure you know, over the last several years has become increasingly polarized and politicized. I think some of the other areas that I've been really interested in, AI, generative AI. So I've tried to sort of capture that within a number of different episodes. One, kind of a general episode, kind of laying out the markers. Secondly, trying to look at it through the lens of labor markets and what that means for wage polarization or inequality within labor markets. And the last one was with the Ada Lovelace Institute, and that was around a kind of outlining a typology of AI harms, which I found incredibly useful. I think the one that I'm really excited about looking into this year is really sort of delving into supply chain risks. And that is in the form of rare earths, critical minerals. It's sort of discussions with academics, but also some of the largest supply chain management companies and corporates and how they're going about this.
And that's fascinating, that focus on science. Sometimes, of course, science can get lost amid the hubris. What are the topics that you think are particularly overlooked maybe and underappreciated in all of the discourse around sustainable investing today?
Sure. I think we need to definitely be more mindful of regional differences that are effectively creating these cleavages around, from a regulatory perspective, around incredibly important terms like fiduciary duty. As an example, with fiduciary duty, there is a very hardened interpretation of what that means around risk-adjusted returns in the United States. But that's much more sort of in flux or flexible in other regions. As an example, the House of Lords just re-examined that with respect to trustees, pension trustees, several weeks ago. And so you find that different terms have this kind of different kind of, I guess, valency. As another example, materiality. Materiality is a fixed term in the United States. And you can look back over the last 90 years in terms of case law, right? In terms of common law. So it was sort of born out of a 1930s Supreme Court decision. And it has been, sort of minutely sort of adapted over the last 90 years, but it's essentially anchored around a specific definition. That is very different in other regions. So Europe is a great example, which isn't about common law, it's about civil law. So things can be recodified. They can be kind of suddenly reborn in different language and interpretation overnight through legislation. So I think that's one really important thing that regulation among different regions is having an effect. I think the other one is data. We're just seeing more and more of it, and they're certainly cynics of data. We like data. I mean, so more data is good, but it just requires a lot more investment in terms of not just buying those data sets, but in terms of kind of stacking a number of competencies. So data scientists, data engineers, quant researchers to really sort of distill this or effectively divine something out of a lot of this data. And that, has been, I think, a big advantage for climate investors over the last 10 to 15 years, particularly a hat tip to the Carbon Disclosure Project, which really started this. But we're now starting to kind of see this in other areas. So biodiversity, it is sort of in its infancy when it comes to data, but that's an area that we're starting to see a lot of development in, the circular economy as well.
Are there any areas that give you cause for hope, or alternatively for despair, as you look around you at how certain issues are being understood and talked about today?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot to be disheartened about, and I mean, to go back to the politicization of ESG, of climate. I mean, certainly there's that, particularly in the face of emerging and improved kind of data sets. So I think that is very disheartening. At the same time, I think where I'm heartened by, and I say this wearing my hat as chair of UKSIF, the UK Sustainable Investment and Finance Association, is just the incredible influx of particularly young people and competencies. So when I started really kind of focusing on sustainable investing over, around 15 years ago, it wasn't so diverse. Now you're finding many people in the science community, climate scientists, ecologists, people, with a real strong background in the natural sciences, start to come over and work with people with finance backgrounds, and sort of drive very differentiated approaches about understanding sort of the risk factors of what climate risk or the dependencies around nature represent to a portfolio.
And do you think that we are generally underestimating any area or missing a trick? Is there something that we're not fully grasping that you think we should look at somewhat differently?
Yeah, I certainly see it's certainly one, and I will admit I'm somewhat biased. I'm the head of RI research at Man Group. We are a diversified multi-strat asset manager, but primarily a large part of our business is quantitative. When I sort of look back at sustainable investing over the last 15 years, a lot of it has been driven by discretionary managers, sort of a fundamental bottom-up view of ESG risks, of climate investing. And I think there's been this notion that quant investing has been very black box oriented. It's been very opaque to kind of understand what these kind of the algorithms driving that is. And I think that's somewhat misguided. I think that investors increasingly want low cost solutions. Secondly, they want solutions where they can manage risk. Whether it's volatility or just sort of risk in general. And I think when you start to bring in quantitative investing, certainly there are limitations. It's hard to engage as you would in a concentrated discretionary fund, but there are a lot of advantages in terms of sort of managing risk across the breadth of a wide portfolio, and then optimizing, and this is the important thing, but optimizing around some sort of climate objective. Maybe that's net zero, maybe that's an ESG kind of score objective. But Yeah, I think there's something that quant investing brings, and particularly when you look at climate investing. So whether it's these IAMs, these integrated assessment models, or as I said, optimization, a lot of climate investing is, and I won't say all of it, but a lot of climate investing is inherently, it's by nature quantitative as an exercise, and I think that can really sort of drive carbon emissions reductions over the long term.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. Thank you for being an ongoing voice in this space. And thank you for sharing your insights on the fast moving area of sustainability with us.
Perfect. Ava, thank you so much for the invitation. This is wonderful.
I'm Aoife Devitt. Thank you for watching 50 Faces TV. See you next time.